Great, are we ready to go?
It's going, Lorene, you're streaming now.
And I'm going to record and
Good to go?
okay.
Yep. Good afternoon, I'd like to call the meeting Iron Range Resources Rehabilitation Board to order. Lorraine, would you please take the roll?
Senator Bach,
Here.
Representative Eklund,
Here.
Senator Eichhorn,
Here.
Representative Weigel,
Present.
Representative Liskar,
Here.
Representative Lewick,
Here.
Senator Root,
Present.
Representative Sandsted.
Here.
We have all 8 members present.
Thank you, Lorraine. Next item on the agenda is item number 3, election of chair. Members, we added this in with the passing of our good friend, our Senator Thomasoni. And we thought that we should make sure that the chair stays with the body that it's supposed to be. So I guess I'd look for any comments from members.
I'd make a motion to appoint Senator Tom Bach as chair.
Representative Lisgard makes a motion to have Tom Bach take over as chair. Senator Tom Bach, is that second? Second by Representative Sandsted. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 What do we got to do a roll call on that, Al? I'm sorry, folks, I got ahead of myself. Lorraine, can you please take the roll?
Senator Bach,
Yes.
Representative Eklund.
Yes.
Senator Eichhorn,
Yes.
Representative Weigel,
Yes.
Representative Liskar,
Yes.
Representative Lewick,
Yes.
Senator Root,
Yes.
Representative Sandsted.
Yes.
We have 8 ayes.
8 ayes and 0 nays. Congratulations, Senator Bach. You're the new chair of the IRRR.
Thank you, Representative Eklund. I sure never thought I'd come to this position in this kind of a path, I guess. Losing Senator Thomasoni this last week. I got a lot of really, really beautiful emails and text messages after he passed, and I just got to read one to you because it does make me smile. And it's from Senator Scott Newman, who lives and represents the area west of the Twin Cities over by Litchfield and Hutchinson. And many of you probably don't know, but Scott was kind of an adopted ranger to David and I because he spent 15 years here in the 70s up until everything collapsed in 81. He had a law practice with Andy Phillips on 2nd Avenue in Virginia. So he really was kind of an adopted ranger to us in the Senate. And so Laura and I got this email from him early on Friday. He said, pretty selfish of me right now, but all I feel is sadness. If there's a hockey rink in heaven, he's throwing off the shackles of ALS and he's on it. That makes me smile. I think that's how we have to think about it. I mean, David lived a pretty full life. He did an incredible amount of work for so many people, improved the lives of so many people. And we all should be just very gracious for the time that he spent working on behalf of others. And I guess if anybody else has anything they want to say about David before we move on with the agenda, I'd like to open the floor up to that.
Well, I'll just say, Mr. Chair.
Representative Liskar.
Mr. Chair, thank you. David meant so much to me, and being from greater Minnesota, it can be lonely down there in St. Paul when you're away from your family. And Senator Thomasoni really took me underneath his wing and made me feel he was my family down there. And he taught me so much. And you know, you have politics and you have people, and he understood politics, but he loved people. And he was extremely effective at what he did. And I'm just glad that I can call him a dear friend. You'll be missed.
Anybody else? Well, I think the most fitting thing probably said was said by, I think originally by Senator Cohen back on March 1st when we had the tribute in St. Paul to David, when he said, if there was a homecoming king in the state senate, everybody would vote for David Thompson. And I think,
Yeah.
he was beloved by both sides of the aisle, by all the staff. He treated everybody so fairly that he's going to be a real legacy there. He will live on at the legislature because he was just such a kind person and so effective for a region. Our region lost a giant. David was so effective at getting things into bills. Sometimes it wasn't even a bill introduced, and we found a way to slip something in somewhere that was important to one of our communities. And that really is an art that just takes some time to learn how to do that. And he was a master at it. So all our communities benefited a great deal by his work. So,
Mr. Chair. This is Representative. I apologize. I'm not there in person, but I just have a few things I'd like to say, if that's okay.
No, go ahead.
Obviously I didn't get to know the senator as long and as well as everyone here, but what I remember vividly about him is when I first had my role for Congressman Stauber as a new, staffer for a Republican congressman on the range. I had to show up to a lot of events, and David was always there. And he always made it a point to introduce me to people, sit down next to me, give me pointers, tell me history on the region, and pushed everyone around him to be a better person, a better fighter for the range. That's something I'm going to remember for the rest of my life, because if I didn't have someone like that pushing me to be better or learn things and really learn to be a public servant for this area, I wouldn't be sitting on this board today. So he leaves just an amazing legacy, and I'm never going to forget that. I want to tell as many people as I can that story, because it didn't matter what, color your jersey was, if there was an R or a D. Senator Tomasoni was just fighting for our region, wanting everyone to be working on the same team. And I'll just never forget that. And I'm going to look to that as inspiration for how I continue my life of public service. So I just wanted to say that for the record.
Well, thank you, Representative Michael.
And Senator Bach, if I may. Yeah. I just want to say, so when I came into the Senate, I was a freshman in the minority and scared to death. And I came into my first committee hearing with in higher ed, and I sat down next to Senator Tomasoni, and he made me feel so welcome. And he really taught me about working together in a bipartisan fashion. And it was all about kindness and showing each other kindness and how to work together. And so I think he really set the tone for me in my career. And I will always appreciate the kindness he always showed me.
Shared by many. Thank you, Senator Wood.
I guess I could just share one thing.
Former Representative Metza.
To the point of David was able to, Senator Tomasoni, I should say, was able to get things into bills. I had texted some friends and thinking about what David really loved, and that was bringing home projects and capital to our region so that all of our communities could thrive. And so I sent a quick text message to some friends in Senate research, and the response to your point, Mr. Chair, I'll just read verbatim here. I can try to do the math, but he was good at hiding projects in random bills, so I'm sure I'm going to miss some. I think that sums up David's career down there pretty good, and just honored to have been a partner with him down there and have learned from him along the way, as with all of you.
Well, let's move on to the minutes from the June 7th meeting are in your packet. We're in order for a motion to approve them if somebody has read them.
I'll move approval, Mr. Chair. I haven't been able to do that for 3 years. So.
Representative Eklund moves approval of the June 7th, 2022 minutes. Second by Senator Sanseed. Any errors or omissions? If not, on approval of the minutes, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
No, anybody opposed? Motion carries. Commissioner. Here we have the commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought it'd be a little less crowded in there if I did this from my office, so
I was pretty sure you were in the building.
I'm in the building. So before I start my comments, I, worked with Senator Thomasoni since his first term in the House, I guess, on various things. And, I've been reading a lot lately of all the testimonials about his career, and I won't take credit for this, but I read online somewhere, somebody posted that the Iron Range has a hole in its heart. And I thought that was a very great way to take a look at his what he's left with us. So so thank you for giving me an opportunity to express that. And with that, I'll get to the agenda of the meeting. So if this Canasteo pit overflow issue has been festering for, I don't know, 20 years or so, and had various legislative actions taken for it. And but unfortunately, when a permanent solution was at hand, there was some mining activity and pumping was started, and so that the permanent solution slipped away. And so we are ready to deal with it again at the legislature, and it's sitting in a bonding bill that has been mostly agreed to but not passed. And but the water levels are reaching, and I'll let Linda Johnson and Mike Liljigan from the DNR talk more specifically about that, but it's getting to the point where we need to start pumping by October 1st, or we could have some catastrophic things happen, possibly. Not for sure, but possibly. And I just want to remind the members of the board that we had a relatively minor pit overflow over at the Hector mine near Giants Ridge a few years ago, when a beaver dam caused an outflow to be compromised. And in the end of the day, that was about a $2 million problem for a relatively small mine pit overflow. So when you look at the Canasteo and what it has potential to be, if we have a lot of rain and a lot of, we had a drought that kind of set us back a little bit, but with the way things are going now, this could be a catastrophic problem. And because the legislature did not act on the permanent solution, we're counting on them to act in the future. We sat down with the DNR and said, there's really, it's one of these issues that there's nobody kind of responsible or at fault or anything like that. So we just decided that we have to step up for our communities and take care of this in the short term at the very least. So that's why I'm recommending the resolution you're going to have before you in just a minute. So that's the only comments I have. So I just wanted you to know the thinking behind it, and that we have some assurances from the governor's office and the DNR that every attempt will be made to get our fund reimbursed when the project is eventually funded by the legislature. Now, I know there's no guarantees of that, but I have a pretty good authority that there will be an effort made to reimburse us. So, and the other thing I would point out is that the permanent solution does require pumping to be able to install the permanent solution. So we're not wasting the money by pumping now. So with that, I will turn it over to I guess Bob Scuffy first, because we have to do a budget amendment. So I'll let Bob do that, and then we'll hear from Linda Johnson and Mike Liljigan from the DNR. So Bob, do you have anything to add?
Well, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, the commissioner is requesting the board, to approve an amendment to our fiscal year 23 budget to add 710,000 from the Taconite Area Environmental Protection Fund carry forward. And this would be added to the Mineland Reclamation Program budget that is currently was approved at the 900,000 to bring it to 1,610,000. And then upon the board's approval, Linda Johnson will present the project in further detail for resolution 23-001.
Ms. Johnson?
Chairman Bach, board members. Before you, we have the Canasteo Pit project, which is located on the west end of the Mesaba Iron Range. And as the commissioner said, is at risk of rising water and poses a threat to the local residents in Bovee. So the DNR and Iron Range Resources and Rehabilitation has recognized the risk posed by the rising water. The proposal is for the current proposal is for IRR funding to establish and implement a contingency pumping on or before October 1st at the Canasteo pit to prevent the water from overtopping the pit until a permanent solution is funded and implemented. As the commissioner stated, we're looking for $710,000. We have Mike Liljegren here with us today to go over the plan in detail. He has some maps also that he will show, and then we will field questions from anyone who has questions. So Mike Liljegren, go ahead. You can take it over from here.
Thanks, Linda. Mr. Chair, board members, thanks again for allowing me to present on the Canasteo contingency pumping plan here. As Commissioner Phillips has stated, we had been working for quite some time, and I think we had a plan all ready to go for a permanent solution. However, without funding, not able to move forward, so we are moving to this contingency pumping plan. And the background for that is current water level sets at about 1311 feet in elevation. The natural overflow of the Canasteo is 1324. And another key elevation is 1318 is as high as the water has ever been on the Canasteo. And that's when the DNR had put in the drain tile system that currently routes groundwater. In essence, it's pit water as well as groundwater in the surrounding Bovee area out and around homes in lower Bovee to Trout Lake. Ultimately that has taken care of the flooding in those basements. So that's really the elevation that we're keying in on this 1318, which drew us to without any action for a permanent solution, that we needed to trigger the contingency pumping, because the pit rises on average based upon precip and snow every year, anywhere from 5 to 7 feet per year. So we're getting up to that point that if nothing was done this fall with pumping, that we could be at that 1318 feet elevation sometime next spring. And we want to make sure that doesn't inundate the drain tile system, and all of a sudden now we have potential people with water in their basements again as we move forward. So it's not, the contingency plan is going into effect more from the standpoint of making sure we don't have that before we would actually even have a natural run out of the pit at 1324. So here's what we have on the map. You can see the pit there, and the current water level as of August 10th was 1311.16 feet in elevation. And the blue line indicates the route that we will plan to pump that water. So that's there on the east end. It was the same location that Magnetation and ERPI were pumping water at the Canasteo, in essence, for their use at Plant 2 in the past. So we're looking to put the pumps, rent pumps, put pumps back in at that location, and follow that same discharge route down through the Holman wetland, underneath 169 into Holman Lake, and ultimately to the Swan River, and then flowing into the Mississippi. So you can go to the next slide, or the estimated cost slide. Actually, if you want to go back to, is the estimated cost slide before that one? Can we go back one? I can start to talk on it as you get there. So the way yeah, there we go. Thank you. So what we have is you'll see at the top of this slide, the total one-time estimated costs of about $200,000 roughly. And that is for the pump rentals, to get the pumps delivered and set up, any site improvements that we have to do, freeze protection on those pumps from what we've heard from the contractor, any electrical work. We've been in touch with Minnesota Power. We have to have a licensed electrician out to make sure that that system is ready to be charged as we move forward. So we'll have to have somebody out, make sure that is kosher and ready to go, and then any monitoring equipment. So that's kind of the overall upfront costs that have to take place before pumping starts. And then once pumping is started, then there's going to be an ongoing monthly cost that's associated with that. That's roughly, that number there is 387,876 is total for a year. So that roughly works out to about $33,000 per month for the renting of the pumps for the long term, the electricity, any pump maintenance that they have in to make sure that the pumps stay running, because those pumps will be running 24/7, 365 for the year. The rate may change as we draw the water level down, because ultimately we're looking to, withdrawing it down was something we had to do in the construction phase anyways. So this will get it to a point, and if it does finally reach what the elevation that we would use for construction, then we may idle those pumps back just to hold it there until construction funding is appropriated and we can move forward with construction. So the overall total there at the bottom with a 20% contingency was what worked into the plan, comes to roughly $710,000 for the year. So next slide. Actually, we went through that one. If you can go to the last slide.
Mike, if I can just interject to the board.
Yeah, Commissioner.
I asked the DNR to come up with a budget that would be not to exceed. So if for whatever reason, we're not going to spend any money unnecessarily. So as he mentioned, these are all estimates and everything, but we tried to be on the generous end, so we won't be coming back in this year period. But if we could also spend, something less than this is possibility as well.
True.
Commissioner, is there any kind of an interagency agreement in writing or a memorandum of understanding or something that would indicate that the agency is going to be reimbursed by DNR once they get funding through the legislature? We're going to have a new commissioner next year. We're going to have a bunch of new board members. I just don't want this to get lost and people forget about the fact that this agency is picking up the tab for what should be a DNR obligation. Mm-hmm. Do we have anything in writing, or is there a way to get something?
Well, we don't have it yet because we are yet to, once this funding is approved by the board, then we'll work on an interagency agreement. And I think we can put things in there, but we got verbal assurances from both the DNR, from the commissioner, from Bob Meyer, their legislative deputy who's in charge of the legislative stuff, and from the governor's office, that they'll be all recommending the reimbursement. I guess until the legislature acts, there's no guarantee. So if the DNR gets the money, we can have that in the agreement that it comes back to us. Absolutely.
So Mr. Lilligren, how many acres of surface is there in the Castile pit?
Oh, Mr. Chair, I don't know the total surface area off the top of my head. That is a fair amount of what ultimately the pumps that we're looking to put in are two 3,500 gallon a minute pumps that we could pump up to 7,000 gallons a minute down that route with any impact to the resource. But I could get you that. I don't know what the current surface area is off the top of my head.
I just think it would be good to know from a precedent standpoint. We've got other smaller pits that are going to create similar type problems. So I think getting our arms around this long-term issue would be helpful.
I would just mention, Senator Bach, that there are three the three pits that have been identified with current risk profiles, I'd call them, is the Canasteel, the Hill Annex, and the St. James over near White Lakes. Those are the only ones that I'm familiar with. And there was some discussion, Representative Sandstead can also address this, because she had put in a bill to develop a legacy mine fund for dealing with these water overflows on all three of these pits. And that might not be a bad approach. And it would be like other flood mitigation funds that the state has had over the years. It could be funded, and then, if there was future need, it might be refunded in the future at some time, but establishing some mechanism so we don't have to go through this crisis management every time we have a pit overflow situation arise.
Commissioner, anything else? Members of the board? Mr. Chair. Representative.
One of the questions that struck me, Mr. Lowe, I got your name wrong, DNR guy. You talked about plant 2. Is there any chance, and you probably don't know that, Commissioner, right now, is there any talk of plant 2 ever reopening, and would they be part of the solution to drawing this pit down if that happens?
Well, I don't know about plant 2, but the new company, Mag Iron, is proposing to operate in this general vicinity, and they would like to do some pumping in the future to access some ore in the Canasteel. But I mean, that's how we got in this place we are now. I think we got to move towards a permanent solution, so we're not faced with a mining company. I mean, if the ore prices go down and they don't continue, then are we, where are we going to be? That's all we got here. So I think, doing the contingency pumping, moving for the permanent solution, and then if there's mining or whatever, that's great. But I think we got to protect the communities, because again, we had a relatively minor problem, and that cost the state $2 million. If this thing gets out of control, with a couple of years of rain and nothing being done, I mean, we could have a catastrophic event here. So we don't want that to happen.
Sure. And thanks, Commissioner. I guess my point is if something happens with Mag Iron or whatever, I think they need to be part of the agreement so that we know that we're not left hanging if that same thing happens to shutting down the plant too and from the other operations. That's the only reason I was making the point.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Representative Eklund, I think that would be the case if they were to come, if Mag Iron were to come forward with some kind of a project proposal, and we've yet to see anything from them. But if they were looking to mine in the Canasteel as they had planned to when they were magnetation, ultimately they'd go through environmental review and have a permit to mine. And then, that's the regulatory hook for financial assurance and stuff like that for an operation that has a permit to mine. Then we could make sure we had financial assurance. If they were to ever come in and mine, then they would be on the hook with that financial assurance to ultimately have an outlet for the Canasteel in the future. And if they didn't, then the DNR would have that financial assurance money set aside to make sure that an outlet would be if they were to ever mine through something at some point in time. But currently, we don't have any plans from Mag Iron as to what they're planning to do in that area.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Lilligren, so can Trout Lake absorb 7,000 gallons a minute here without creating problems for other property owners? And is there, I don't know if it's the Prairie River that flows out of there, or are there any downstream impacts of this that we'll hear about later?
Yeah, we've looked at it, Mr. Chair. We've looked at all of those. Our plan, the contingency plan, will take it through the Holman Wetland Complex and Holman Lake, not to Trout Lake. Trout Lake definitely could not handle that. We've done many of hydraulic capacity studies. To put that much water into Trout Lake would ultimately raise water levels on Trout Lake. We can't get the water out fast enough through Trout Creek. The capacity isn't there. Magnetation, when they were looking to pump water into Trout Lake, they were looking at a 2-pump process, which would have pumped water into Trout Lake on the north end and then pumped water back out of Trout Lake on the south end into the Swan River, just to make sure. There's a number of properties that set fairly low on Trout Lake that a rise in water level would have property inundated with water. So yeah, there's no easy solution to take a lot of water to Trout Lake. And since Magnetation was pumping to Holman at about 10,000 gallons a minute, they were monitoring the downstream water levels and flows, and we didn't have a problem when they were operating, and things have not changed in that route. So that's why our contingency plan was to go right back to that route, because we know it can be done. And to answer your comment on Prairie, there's just some other issues now with water quality going to the Prairie and Wild Rice that have since come into play, that the water quality in the Canasteel is relatively good water quality, just from the standpoint of sulfate and Wild Rice. We'd be limited on the amount we could pump there. So therefore that's the reason why we have chosen Holman as our route. It has already been done, and we know that the capacity can handle it.
Representative Listgaard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And going back to Chair Bach's comment about temporary and versus long-term solutions. When we're talking, it says that the DNR is going to manage. Is that the local communities that are going to be watching over these pumps, or is the DNR going to have staff? Who's taking on that responsibility, and at what cost?
Mr. Chair and Representative Listgaard, are you talking about the contingency pumping that we're going to be doing?
Correct.
Yeah. That's going to be in part of the contract. The rental agreement and stuff will have ultimately somebody that oversees whether or not it's some kind of electrical or interface where if a pump goes down, somebody gets called to make sure that they're back out there maintaining. None of the DNR staff will be, maintaining that. That's all going to be part of the contract and the agreement that we sign with whomever that is to bring us the pumps. That will all be part of that monthly fee, upfront fee as well. That we're getting pumps. They're going to whoever we're renting them from is going to do the maintenance of that, and they will ultimately be the ones to make sure they stay up and running.
Yeah, that's been budgeted for, but Dave, Representative Listagard, I think the answer on the other side, on the permanent solution side, there was some general fund money proposed for the long-term maintenance of the permanent solution. The permanent solution is going to be relatively passive, though, just so you know. It's designed so it doesn't require much maintenance, but it will have to be inspected to make sure the passive part of it doesn't get plugged up or something. And that is being built into the funding that is being proposed to the legislature. I think over 20 years, I think, or longer, I can't remember.
Over 40.
40 years is being pre-funded to be sure that there's not a maintenance issue.
Mr. Chair,
Representative Sandstein.
thank you. All I was gonna say is, I do think it's very important as we move forward and anticipate the upcoming legislative session, that we do think about a legacy mine account. This is a bill that I had proposed. It would deal with issues, not only dealing with high water levels, but other issues with legacy mine pits. It could be sulfate issues, it could be invasive species, it could be any number of things, but we don't have great clear language around legacy mine pits, and there could be a whole host of issues. These three that we've heard about with the Canastillo, the Hill Annex, and the St. James, those tend to deal with, water levels. But there are other issues. So I think it would behoove us to continue to look at a long-term solution moving forward. Canastillo is obviously the foremost importance right now, but the others are not far behind. So thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to add, I want to thank the agency's response to being able to step up and work with the DNR and the governor's office to bring these funds to us today so we can get this done. Obviously the communities of Coleraine, Bovey, Taconite, Arbo Township are right in the heart of my district. This is an issue I hear about almost on a weekly basis. This is not the long-term solution, but this gets us on that right step to give those people peace of mind. Because I tell you what, a week doesn't go by without my phone ringing off about someone who lives in Coleraine or Bovey concerned about their future of living in our small towns up here. So thank you for the agency stepping up to this today. And I look forward to getting that permanent solution in place.
Any other comments, members? Representative Sandstein moves approval of resolution 23-001. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Representative Michael seconds. Any discussion? Commissioner, any more comments?
Oh, we'll need to do a roll call vote, though.
Clerk will call the roll.
Senator Bach,
Yes.
Representative Eklund.
Yes.
Senator Eichhorn,
Yes.
Representative Eigel,
Yes.
Representative Listegar.
Yes.
Representative Luer,
Yes.
Senator Rude.
Keep the thumbs up, I think.
I think so.
Senator Rude. Senator Rude. Representative Sandstead.
Yes.
Senator Rude votes yes.
Okay, thank you. So we have 8 yes.
The resolution is adopted. Commissioner, you want to give us the board members a little update on what you envision for additional business in front of the board between now and the end of the year?
Yes. Can you still hear me? I hope. Yes. Yeah. So what, if we didn't have this kind of a special meeting for this Canastillo issue, our plan usually is sometime in the September, October timeframe. Now it'll probably be late October. We'd look at a board meeting and then one at the very end of the year. So meeting with this board as it's configured 2 more times. And that would be dealing with our normal programmatical and grant, the environmental grants and program stuff. I don't, this was kind of a special deal, having to amend the budget and everything. So it'd be more of a traditional meeting, fall meeting, and then end of the year meeting. And then there'll be a new board, 8-member board in the future. Some of you possibly on it, I hope, and then they'll reorganize after the first of the year. If there's any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any unfinished business, anybody?
I really appreciate everybody pulling together on short notice and getting this meeting together. And this is very important to us and important to our friends on the west end of the range that we take care of this. So,
Mr. Chair.
Forwards on Metza.
I think the only thing I'd mention is for those who might not have seen, there'll be a visitation service for Senator Thomasoni this Thursday evening and a funeral on Friday. I don't have the details yet from the site, but I'll get those out.
The visitation's Thursday night. The funeral is 11 o'clock Friday morning. And the Catholic Church in Chisholm is, anybody know the name?
St. Joseph's.
St. Joseph's.
St. Joseph's in Chisholm. We'll see many of you there, I'm sure. Seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.